This watch by Nezumi is one of those watches that looks even better in person than it does on pictures, and it already looked pretty amazing on pictures to begin with. Now, the first time I saw this watch, which is called the Voiture, and Nezumi is a Swedish brand, the first time I saw it was on Instagram, and I knew I had to have one to review. Thanks to the guys at Nezumi, I have this one here today, and it is just a beauty. The first thing that you'll notice, obviously, is that aesthetic that they've gone for, keeping it, I'd say, quite vintage looking, with that mustard colored dial with the mix of the cream subdials and that black background that kind of looks like panda eyes. And also you can see these polished indices, and every little detail about this watch, even when you look at it in close up, it looks spot on, it looks perfect, especially when you take into account the fact that this is a watch that comes in at well under 400 euros. And I mean, just look at, for example, that weight balance on the seconds hand with that N, the logo of Nezumi. Just these kind of details you usually don't see in watches in this price range that are already offering so much value for your money. So the first thing that I love about this watch is how they've designed this dial, how they've balanced everything out, how they've spaced everything out, and how they have made it work in a way that is so symmetrical, that is so aesthetic. They've not overcrowded it, they've not overdone it. However, there are quite a lot of elements that catch the eye. I think that the main thing that I noticed right away with this watch was that had they put in a date option, I saw some comments of people saying they want a date model. However, had they put in a date window, in my opinion, they would have completely thrown off the balance of this dial, so I'm really happy they didn't do it. Also, the movement in this watch is a Mecha Quartz by Seiko VK63, and I have no problem with those kind of movements. Seiko movements, obviously, for this kind of watch in this price range are going to be pretty much about as good as you can get, especially if we're talking about chronographs. I do have a chronograph coming in the next week by Vintro that has a Seagull chronograph automatic movement, so I'm going to be reviewing that too over the next few days. But this one in particular, what I really like about the outside of the watch, the case and the bezel, is the fact that they've put this bezel that has quite a vintage feel to it. It has that kind of faded, kind of smoky, matte finish to it, which I think looks perfect. It goes so well with the dial, and it goes so well with the actual aesthetic of this watch. It would have been completely jarring and contrasting had they put a shiny aluminium bezel, not to talk about a ceramic one, obviously. But then also you move on to the case, and the kind of detail that you see on this watch case is details that not only do I not expect for this price range on this kind of a watch, but I don't really expect on a chronograph within anywhere near under $1,000, because in reality, and this is one thing that I have to say about chronographs, most times most microbrands that make chronographs only seem to focus on the dial, and they completely ignore the case because they think that people are just going to be buying it because of the dial. So a lot of the times you see very rudimentary, very simple finishing on the case, and then you probably have a case back without any engraving, just with some laser etched text if you're lucky. However, here you can see that from the point of view of a macro lens to the point of view of you looking at it on your wrist, this watch has been finished to a very, very high standard. One of the main things that I noticed on the case of the watch is that separation that you can see there with that lip of the bezel. And you can see the difference between that brushed finishing on the sides of the case, and then polished on the top of the lugs, and then obviously polished on that bezel. And I just think that separation looks so classy, so elegant, and especially with that sapphire crystal, which is a double dome sapphire crystal, and you can see how it just sticks out there on the edges, which once again plays into the whole vintage aesthetic of it. And by the way, this is a very, very nice crystal for this price range. range. Obviously for sapphire crystal it's not much. It's not a rarity anymore in these days. You can even find it in watches in the sub $100, for example in many Paganis that are coming out recently. However, this crystal is very nice, very nicely finished on the edges, and as I said, that double dome just adds that extra special touch to it. Now you look at the case back, and once again, I mean, they haven't really spared any costs on the case back. You've got a very nice engraving with the Nezumi logo polished, and you see the action of the chronograph. I have no problem with how it works. Once again, this is a Seiko mecha quartz, so there's not going to be any real issues with it. I do like how it has a click when you actually press the buttons, and obviously that flyback that works like a dream and lands spot on the 12. Now personally, the main reason I don't really use chronographs or have many chronographs in my collection is because I like to be able to see that sweep in hand at all times. And obviously with a chronograph you're not really supposed to let the chronograph hand run at all times, so I do like that motion on my wrist, which is probably the main reason why I don't wear it. And the other one is because of how these buttons look, the actual pushers next to the crown. I'm not particularly a fan of them. However, because this watch is so thin, as you can see here, and because the profile of the watch is so well tapered at the edges, not only does it not look like a big clunky chronograph watch, like for example some watches by Aviate, like the Hawker Harrier that I reviewed a few months ago, but it also is a dream to wear. It's so comfortable on the wrist. I mean, you really forget about actually wearing it once you've got it on. So this watch has not left my wrist since a week ago that I got it and I received it for the first time, and it's definitely one of my favorites in my collection at the moment. Now obviously not everything can be perfect, there always has to be a downside, and I think the downside here is the straps. Now listen, maybe these straps are just a different kind of leather, or the leather has a different treating, a different finishing that I'm not accustomed to, but I think they feel extremely cheap. They feel terrible. I mean, I'm not trying to be mean here, but I mean, they do feel worse than straps that I've seen on watches that cost $50, and I think you can see that here in this video. They just feel like cardboard pretty much. So as soon as I got this watch, the first thing I did was take these straps off. I'm gonna chuck these straps away, and I put on these straps, which have the same kind of rally finishing. However, these are obviously much nicer. They have a vegetable tan. These are from Undone. I really like the leather straps that Undone and that Lilienthal Berlin make for the price range of around $40 to $60. I think they're probably the best on the market at the moment, and I really like how this tone, this color goes with this watch. I think this is the strap that this watch deserves to have, but it also worked perfectly well, for example, with a lighter colored strap like the one I've got on this Dufa. But now listen, to kind of summarize this video, to give my end opinions. By the way, I didn't put in a lume shots because even though they do have super luminova, I mean, I couldn't even capture it on video. There's nothing really there. I mean, it fades out in a few seconds, so it's not even worth it. You're not going to be getting a chronograph because of a great lume, so don't be expecting that when you get this one. However, as I said, this is a 40mm watch, 47mm lug to lug, 18.5 height, and it has a lug width of 20mm, and it's waterproof to 50 meters. However, it doesn't have a screw down crown, so I wouldn't be taking this in the water with me. Now listen, for the money, I think this is one of the best microbrand watches that I've seen in probably the past year, and for the money I really can't complain about this watch in any real way. It's very easy to recommend it because it's a stunning watch and it's its own watch. It's not trying to emulate anything else. It does have obviously these little visual cues from different brands, but it's its own watch, which is something I really appreciate. Anyways guys, I hope you enjoyed this review. Till the next time, peace.